Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias Roush. Today we're discussing Mr. Robot, Season 4, Episode 4, 404 Not Found. Elliot, Mr. Robot, and Tyrell walking in a winter wonderland. Darlene meets a bad Santa. Dom is DTF. So, this was what you would call a bottle episode or a more character-centric, introspective type episode. Mr. Robot always tends to have some of these episodes towards the middle of the season, normally to help flesh out the characters. However, I found this episode a little bit more difficult to accept as a standalone episode, mostly because I thought it was very much style over substance, and there's really only about 20 minutes of story that really give us anything of substance within this, I don't know, hour show, 45 minutes to an hour. So I will say this specific episode looked completely different from the majority of the other episodes that have come from Mr. Robot before. Anytime Sam Esmail leaves New York City, specifically, it's always very interesting to see the type of cinematography that follows it and directorial styles. So I will say, like I said, it always looks like $1,000,000, but there's basically three main storylines. One, Dom is trying to, she's masturbating on the computer, doing sexting, sex chat, all that type of stuff. Turns out, I'm going to go ahead and go through the plot synopsis, so I would have assumed you've already seen all of this, so be prepared for full-on 404 talk. So, I want you to have seen the end of of 404 before you start this. So yeah, knowing what happens at the end, we're going to start with the Dom storyline. The Dom storyline, basically she's sexting online, chatting with someone, Harry, Happy, Henry, or whatever the hell. It's supposed to be a callback to Christian Slater's old... oh wait, is it? It's either a callback to Christian Slater's character in an older movie. I thought it was based off of Heather's or the Cheech and Chong reference. But regardless, she's talking to someone named Happy, Harry, Hard On, Henry, or whatever the fuck. And Dom falls asleep. Turns out that she has a dream of a dark army operative drowning her in a tub. I thought, shot wonderfully, but ultimately by the end of the hour, it's like, why did we see that? Why are we readdressing Dom's loneliness and specifically revolving her sex life? Is that what's going to get her in trouble? We do see Dom pleasuring herself to interrogation videos of Darlene, so she's still thinking about Darlene. That's, I don't know. I really don't know what to say about that. Kind of, weak sauce, and probably illegal in some way. But besides all that, I didn't think that her having a nightmare dream about the Dark Army operative drowning her really told us anything more than we already knew. We already know Dom is under the thumb of Dark Army. Why do we have to see this again? I felt like it could have been done in a much quicker sequence, if I want to say that correct. I'm getting kind of season 2 vibes with this episode specifically because season 2 was very introspective in the majority of the way it was unfolding in the narrative. However, and with saying that, it's leaving me wanting more. I'm like, this looks amazing, but with the dialogue you're giving me, with the storylines you're showing me, the Dark Army, I've known that the Dark Army was going to was already on top of Dom, and I already know that she's lonely. I don't need to see. Personally, I was just not a fan of it. The next storyline was Darlene's story. At the very beginning of the show, she basically says, they got to basically do another hack into one of these banks, or whatever, to get a terminal, to get access to a terminal, so that they can hack into the Dark Army stuff, because the Susan Jacobs line ended up becoming a dead end, or they ran into a dead end because of it. So Darlene's freaking out at the beginning. She's trying to hotwire a car. Ends up this guy looking like Billy Bob's Bad Santa's ripoff cosplay or something like that. Just walks up out of nowhere. And long story short, they kind of have a connection, and she offers to drive him home because he's drunk as fuck, and he's giving off almost every signal that you would think that he was contemplating, suicide. He talks about, the sadness hurts, the goodbyes are short and final, and he's quoting, wonderful life, and referencing poems and books and shit like that. And at the very end, it's very much this Darlene kind of looking in the mirror and kind of seeing, some of the worst aspects that she would expect. She's like, oh my God, he's got pills. Oh my gosh, he's got alcohol. Oh my gosh, he's talking about, short and final goodbyes. It's like, this guy's going to kill himself. And really, it's just kind of showing her state of mind and state of being. And at the very end of their little conversation, their drive, at once, it was around the time that Darlene and this bad Santa looking guy were headed back in the car. I was like, this fucking episode is going to be a complete introspective, ride, and Esmail is going to save all story till the very fronts and the ends of the show, because I'm starting to realize his structure when it comes to these more introspective episodes. So normally that doesn't bother me, having Darlene have reflective thoughts, geared toward her in the form of this bad Santa looking guy. But I was like, it's because I can't binge to the next episode immediately that makes it just a little bit more frustrating, because I have to linger with this episode a little bit extra longer. So, yeah, Darlene's freaking out. She says she's lost her entire family. She's lost her boyfriend. She's lost her mom, dad, everybody. And the only person that really cares about her is Elliot. And she can't, she needs to make sure he's okay, that type of thing. And the Santa Claus guys is like, all right. He's like, fuck it, I'm done. I've dressed up for the kids, and I'm done for the day. And so he's like, and my wife's not dead. You're fucking, you're kind of like imprinting your emotions onto me. But I mean, onto me, the Santa Claus guy. But yeah, we all know what happens. Essentially nothing. She drives down. She ends up borrowing his car, which isn't actually his. I'm not really sure whose car she ends up taking, but because his car ends up being in the driveway. So she leaves his house, goes down the highway, and starts screaming. I think we see her start to leave New York, and I think she does pull over, and she's just like upset. And Elliot, Robot, and Tyrell. Okay, so we're going to start from there. It's just kind of a slight rewind. Tyrell and Elliot are leaving Elliot's place, and Tyrell goes outside to the Dark Army's truck that is listening in on them, which it looks like they're listening like hard. It's not just like one or two just computers, but they've got like a full-on system in the back of those cars. And so we should assume that pretty much everyone that's under the surveillance of Dark Army is having this happen to them. So yeah, the Tyrell knocks out the driver of the Dark Army guy, and it's implied that he's dead at that point, and Elliot's kind of freaking out a little bit. So they take the van, drive it outside of town, and they run into this gas station clerk who's just annoying out the ass. I mean, she's just like, "Oh, don't I know you from somewhere?" And of course, she recognizes Tyrell because he's an international. Well, he was an international criminal, and now he's an international hero. So she probably recognizes him from the the tube. So from there, Elliot is just freaking out because she's just like lollygagging, taking her sweet ass time, trying to get them changed, trying to get them situated because there was, I think they said the internet was down in this Christmas Eve. So Elliot ends up freaking out on her. She's like, "Oh my gosh, you can learn some manners," and then she ends up telling them the trail to head back to the city. And I had forgotten by that point that they had walked outside, and the driver that they had said was dead evidently wasn't dead, and he gotten in the van and he's drove off. Which, why the hell did you leave the keys in the car? That's my first question. But yeah, so he grabs the van, and then Mr. Robot, Elliot, and Tyrell go on this the Winter Wonderland walk, and I thought it was shot gorgeously. I thought just all the entire time, the colors, the cinematography, even when we were looking with Darlene, and these great shallow depth of field shots with Darlene and the Christmas lights in the back. It's just absolutely gorgeous. Christmas time is amazing to shoot at if you are a photographer or a videographer. So this episode definitely shows that as well. You can see that on firsthand. So they are in the woods, what feels like majority of the episode, and they're just talking back and forth to each other. Elliot at one point kind of switches over to Robot to kind of, talk a little bit more softer to Tyrell a little bit. But then Tyrell is talking to both Robot and Elliot at certain points that makes it definitely a little bit more confusing for us as the viewer to figure out who the hell's talking, or, which Elliot is taking over at this point. So, yeah, they talk basically about Elliot not giving a shit. That's why he wears a black hoodie. That's why Tyrell does wear a $6,000 suit. He does give a shit. He wants to be presentable. Elliot, on the other spectrum, is the exact opposite. Black hoodie, always covering up, that kind of thing. Other than that, we don't get a substantive piece of, an argument, dialogue, nothing between these guys. I very much was mostly disappointed in what I think this might be Tyrell's last episode, and they give him such little to do. I just don't know how I feel about it. My guess is this isn't going to be his last episode of the season. If they do end up bringing the entire cast back that we've lost, then I will be a little bit more forgiving. But if this is the last scene we're going to see Tyrell with, this kind of, I don't know, puttering out of a major character, in my opinion, just seems a little bit soft and underhanded, in my opinion. Just the fierceness of this character, and he's once this what some people would say is like a American Psycho type, just craziness flying off the handles. It really just felt like he just kind of puttered out toward the end and just gave up. And some of my predictions earlier were Dark Army was going to come through and really fuck some shit up, like maybe put Tyrell as CEO, and then I have his baby, in a place where they could always have access to him, and Tyrell wouldn't be able to do anything because of the safety of his son. So killing him at this point, I'm like, we're running out of episodes to kind of wrap this up in a meaningful way. So this is the first episode this season that has really started to give me concern towards the end of the show, and maybe take a little bit less stock out of it, and maybe say I might not like how the show ends. I mean, this has been one of my favorite shows from the start. I mean, it's one of the shows that got me into podcasting, got me listening to TV and podcast reviews, and this was the one that did it. It was the one, asking all of the tough questions, and I had all the most interesting podcasters that I've listened to, the Bald Moves, the post-show recaps, everyone on YouTube. Tons of people around the world are talking about this, and I know that we all want to have an excellent journey, but an even better destination, because it makes it easier to recommend ultimately. Because I want to say, a lot of people had stock in the Game of Thrones, show, and I was one of them. I did a full on rewatch, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm still a little disappointed in the way that ended. It left a big impact, and so Mr. Robot is obviously not that big of a show, but I still want it to land smoothly. So overall, this last few minutes, it does kick up the notch. Once they see the deer was hit by the van, and the van is crashed or wrecked or whatever, Dark Army guys in there. We hear a couple shots go off to the left while Mr. Robot and Elliot are checking out the right, where the passenger side is, and we walk around. Oh, and we do see the Dark Army guys shoot a couple of, fire off a few times at Elliot and Robot, missing, and then he ends up shooting himself after a few more shots go off. We walk over to Elliot and Robot walk over to the other side of the car, and Tyrell turns around slowly, and takes off his jacket, or he reveals from under his jacket that he's been shot, kind of a little bit above the hip. I was like, God dang it! I was like, if this is the way that Tyrell goes out and he doesn't have anything substantial to do, I'm just trying to figure out what the heck his purpose was to even stay in the story this long. I mean, I've wanted him to do. I felt like Tyrell has been such a missed opportunity for quite a long time, and he's such an interesting character that I just don't know what to do with him. And I've never really felt like this until now. I do feel like season 2 almost feels like the result of that. I mean, we're missing such a major character, his presence throughout most of the season 2, and we're wondering what the hell happened to him, that we don't get but one episode on season 3 that really gives us the quote-unquote character development that we needed for this character just to see what the hell he's been doing. So yeah, mixed feeling, mixed bag. Him getting shot in the stomach is a little bit in my opinion. Same thing. I mean, Elliot was shot at the end of season 2, so it's like, can we not do the same thing? Tyrell just wants to have this, last hoorahs, and just going into the woods and finding this random ass blue light. And now through the entire episode that they're walking through the Winter Wonderland woods, they are hearing this, what sounds like animal howling, and it sounds like this animal's dying. And honestly, what I heard was from a couple of other podcasters and reviewers is that they think that Tyrell's already given up by the middle of this episode. I mean, he's talking about the end of this destination only leads to death. And I should have maybe picked up on that a little bit more. I figured that he was talking about a little bit more broadly. I didn't think that he was like immediately at the end of this trail that I'm going to die. Like, that's not what I was thinking at all. And I was getting kind of Pulp Fiction vibes when we saw the blue light. Pulp Fiction has the golden case, Wallace's case, that we never see what's in it. So I kind of feel like this is Sam Esmail's way of either Tyrell going into the blue light, like the computer, error blue light, or he found a fucking alien or something like that. I really don't want it to go into the alien territory or something like that. Like, the way this played out the end was in a way that it could be all in his head, but I felt like we were seeing that blue light long before he was shot. So and some people say if he was part of Elliot's persona, then which I still don't think, I don't buy. I just don't think it would make sense that if that was Elliot's persona, that maybe it's Elliot killing a part of himself. I don't know. There's a lot of theories going around about it. This episode was definitely funk, funky in a way. But let me think. The third. Let me just briefly touch on the third episode, the White Rose episode, and then Elliot goes on a date with Mr. Robot to go get the key fob from the Dark Army contact. Just real quickly, I enjoyed the first 20 minutes of the third episode. Honestly, like 3 or 4 more times than this entire episode. I thought the opening White Rose sequence was just so much more telling in the way it was presented, and then the storyline, that every shot felt like it was for a purpose, and every line that they were saying just felt like it was for a purpose. And for this, I guess I was searching so much into the dialogue and then in the visuals that I just couldn't find any substance in it, and it's a little bit disappointing. And the third episode I really enjoyed because we get to see Robot and Elliot, go on a date. And Elliot is such a weird, odd ball when it comes to being on a date, that seeing Robot kind of step in for him is almost like a sigh of relief. And we do have this, like, what a lot of people are saying is father-son bonding time that never would have happened in any other scenario. And so that's the one thing that I really like about that third episode. It did slow down when he goes on to the date with what's her face? I'm sorry, I can't remember her name. Her name's like Aaron or something like that. I don't know, but I still thought that there's just so much more striking imagery and better narrative storytelling in that third episode than this one, just mostly because we are in the end game right now. We have only less than 9 episodes, or we have like 9 episodes left if there's 13 total. Then yeah, we are in the end game. My opinion, we don't have time to dilly dally watching Dom have nightmares about the Dark Army coming to get her. The Dark Army should already be getting her or got her. We're we don't have time to be just yerking off all over the place, and then we have our main characters completely separated throughout the entire episode. It was frustrating for me. I don't know if this episode would have fit better if they would have cut about half of it. They easily could have cut the entire time in the woods. They could have instantly just had that van run into something. I was thinking that if they would have just had Robot and Tyrell find that van like maybe 30 minutes into the show, I'd be like hooked, because the music comes back, we have the tension back, we're not quite talking all around in circles and up our ass talking about whether we like each other or not. It's just like we don't have time for that. I just feel like if we are in the true end game, if this is no more Robot after this, we don't have time for slow dilly-dally episodes. If we get another one of these, I'm not going to go easy on it, because I'm going to say that USA or whoever decided the episode count is just stretching them out and forcing money in places that doesn't need to be there. But yeah, like I love the acting of Martin Wallstrom's kind of crazy-eyed American Psycho ass. But Elliot has been a tad frustrating for me this season. I do want him to talk to us. Some post-show recaps that talked about the fact that Elliot might not talk to us the entire season until the very end. I would not be surprised about that. I would really rather that not happen, because Elliot seems like such an integral part of season 4, or just the show, that I just want to know. And so I do want to know if, well, yeah, I want to know. So this has been an interesting episode. The big blue light at the end, fade to white, fade to blue, fade to whatever. yeah, it's been another one. But hopefully this kind of helps you navigate through what happened through the episode. I know this is much more opinion based, not so much like, oh, you remember the details about, all the little lines that they said, it's a wonderful life, or, the one from the one poem. I can't remember the fucking poem right now, but yeah, I just frustrated. You can probably hear it in my voice, but it'll be all right. Thank you for listening to the Look It Up podcast. Check out all the Look It Up podcasts. We have covered Mr. Robot. All the seasons are all locked, booked, loaded. They're all in the show notes, SoundCloud. That's where you can find it. Rate the podcast 5 stars. That's how we stay high in the iTunes and noticed. I mean, this is up to y'all. So thank you for listening to the Lucky Dog podcast. If I could improve, if you want to hear some more detail, if you want to comments, questions, ratings, reviews, you know where to go. Check all the social medias, the Twitch. We are streaming on there. Instagram. We are live on Instagram, Facebook, got the groups. I did see on IMDb that this episode had a lot of high ratings. I didn't see too many negative ratings on it. I think I was probably more of a way more negative than a lot of people were. I was telling my friends that, specifically Ben's, he watches Robot. I was like, it was much more of a mixed bag of an episode, but I didn't hate it. It's just I feel like the majority of the problem is the fact that I can deal with the slow episodes. I can deal with the slow burn. I can deal with the character study, and I like character studies generally, as long as we get something out of it. But this mostly just felt like middle part of a movie that I'm waiting to get to a better part, and it's not like it's a bad part. It just feels so out of the chunk of the narrative, and the fact that we're having to sit down and watch it for 13 weeks, it does feel like I just turned on the middle of a movie and then turned it off before the climactic part had started to happen. So that's, kind of how I feel about it. So thank you for listening. Look It Up podcast. You know what to do. Take it easy, friend.